Today we are talking about something that's hiding inside the software we all use every single day. Think of it like a ticking time bomb, buried deep in the foundations of our favorite apps and websites.
So let me just start with a question for you. What if the single biggest threat to your company or to your personal data isn't some super secret brand new hack? What if it's actually a well-known, well-documented flaw, one that already has a fix, but it's just sitting there, completely ignored in your code? Well, that's the reality we're going to unpack today.
To really get a handle on this, think about building a house. You would never, ever build a brand new home with rusty pipes that you know are going to leak or ancient frayed electrical wiring, right? Of course not. You'd insist on using modern, tested, reliable materials. And yet, in the world of software, it happens all the time. It is shockingly common for applications to be built on a foundation of old digital components that are known to be faulty.
And that brings us right into the first part of our explainer, where we're going to identify what these cracks in our digital foundation actually are. Now, the technical term for this problem is vulnerable and outdated components. It's really just a fancy way of saying that your application depends on pieces of code that someone else wrote, things like libraries or frameworks, and those pieces have security holes that are public knowledge. It is the digital version of that rusty pipe we just talked about. It's a known weakness, just sitting there, waiting for someone to take advantage of it. So, why on earth is this so common? Well, a lot of the time it comes down to a lack of basic digital housekeeping. Development teams might not even have a list of all the components they're using. Or they fail to keep an eye out for new threats, and worst of all, they can fall into that really dangerous mindset of, hey, if it works, don't fix it. As we're about to see, that kind of thinking, well, it can be absolutely catastrophic. To make this threat feel a little less abstract and a lot more real, let's look at one of the most infamous and frankly preventable data breaches in modern history, the 2017 Equifax breach. Just take a look at this number for a second. Let it sink in. 147 million. That's how many people had their most sensitive personal information, we're talking social security numbers, birthdays, home addresses, stolen in that single breach. This wasn't just some corporate headache. It was a personal disaster for nearly half the entire population of the United States. And this timeline, this is where the story gets really frustrating. A huge vulnerability was discovered in a popular web framework called Apache Struts in early March 2017. And guess what? A fix was released almost immediately. But Equifax, they just failed to apply it. For over 2 months, they left a known unlocked door wide open on their network. And in May, the attackers walked right on in. The attack itself was brutally, almost ridiculously simple. The criminals didn't need to be evil geniuses, they just had to be methodical. They scanned the internet for this specific, known vulnerability. They found it at Equifax, they used it to get in, and then they spent months just quietly siphoning out data. And the most important thing to remember here is that this entire disaster was preventable. And don't think for a second that the Equifax case was a one-off thing. It's basically a playbook that attackers use over and over again. So let's take a look at their broader strategy for turning these outdated components into easy wins for them. Attackers have a whole menu of options to choose from. They can go for the direct approach, exploiting a publicly known flaw, just like in the Equifax case. But they can also get way more clever, targeting something called a dependency of a dependency. That's a vulnerable component that you didn't even know your software was using. And maybe the most dangerous of all are supply chain attacks, where they actually poison a popular library at its source, basically turning a trusted tool into a Trojan horse for thousands of unsuspecting users. Okay, so that's the problem. It's serious, it's widespread, but here's the good news. It's also solvable. So now we're going to shift our mindset from being reactive to being proactive. Let's talk about how you actually build a secure foundation. The solution really boils down to 4 key pillars. First up, inventory, because you can't protect what you don't know you have. Second, monitor. You have to be actively looking for threats. Third, automate. You've got to make security an automatic, unavoidable part of your development workflow. And finally, remediate. When you find a problem, you have to fix it, and you have to fix it fast. All right, let's start with inventory. This is the absolute bedrock of your defense. It means creating a complete, detailed list of every single third-party component you're using. And this isn't a one-and-done task. It needs to be a living document, what's often called a software bill of materials or an SBOM, that you are constantly maintaining. Next up, monitoring, and automation, which really go hand in hand. Picture this ideal workflow. A developer writes some code and pushes it to the repository. Instantly, an automated process kicks off. It scans every single component and dependency for known issues. Now, if it finds a serious vulnerability, the whole process stops dead in its tracks. The build fails, and the right people are alerted immediately. This approach turns security into a proactive gatekeeper, not a reactive cleanup crew. So, the big question is, how do you actually make all this happen? Let's get into the specifics, the tools and the strategy you need to build an ongoing, proactive defense. The great news is you don't have to do this all by hand. There's a whole category of tools called software composition analysis, or SCA, that are designed specifically for this. Platforms like Snyk, Black Duck, and many others can automate this entire process for you, scanning your code, identifying every component, and flagging any known vulnerabilities. But I have to be clear, tools are only half the battle. They are practically useless without a solid process behind them. This means having a real, formal patch management strategy, a clear plan to prioritize which vulnerabilities to fix first, test the fixes so they don't break anything else, and then get those security updates deployed as fast as humanly possible. And this really brings us to the single most important takeaway, the big mindset shift. That old tech mantra, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, is just dangerously outdated. In today's world, that passive attitude is a literal invitation for an attack. Proactive maintenance isn't just a good idea anymore, it's the new baseline for security. Which leaves us with one final thought to chew on. Most organizations spend a ton of time and money on their digital locks, things like firewalls and access controls. But as we've seen today, real security runs so much deeper. It's about the very foundation your software is built on. So I'll leave you with this. You've definitely checked the locks on your doors, but have you checked your foundation? Thanks for watching.